Welcome to the Common Man Football Show. My name is James Coburn, and today's episode we're doing another listener request from WPG Central. It says, could you break down Seattle's defensive line, including Clark, Reed, and McDowell, college production and athletic traits as they are second stringers? Well, Jarran Reed isn't a second stringer, at least last time I checked the depth chart, but I'll still do the request anyway. So that's what we're going to do today. We're going to look at those three players, Frank Clark, Jarran Reed, and Malik McDowell, in terms of their analytics profiles, in terms of their college production and their athleticism data coming out, and then hopefully come to some sort of conclusion about what their potential could be on the Seattle Seahawks in the future based on all the data and all the other sort of variables. So terms and definitions will be in the description. So if you're new to the show and you don't really know what defensive market share data is and you don't really know what athleticism data is, just go to the description. All the terms and definitions will be there. And if you still are confused, just leave a comment. So starting with Frank Clark. When it comes to Frank Clark, in terms of production coming out, he had an 88.30 solo tackle market share score, 46.10 sack market share, and 85.44 tackle for loss market share score. Based on his production, he looks like a starting defensive end / outside linebacker. He had very high solo tackle data, he had very high TFL data, but his sack data is a bit, it's a bit of a concern. There has not been a multiple Pro Bowl or a multiple All-Pro edge rusher with less than a 61.84 sack market share score, yet anyways. And this is since 1989 as well. So I would say that's the only sort of question mark with Frank Clark, is based on his production data, is that he didn't really have a ton of sacks at Michigan when it comes to just market share data. When it comes to his athleticism, this is why I think the Seattle Seahawks brought him in. Based on his athleticism, he had a 96.92 explosive body swing score, a 77.46 speed score, and a 98.58 flexibility score. So he pretty much has all-pro potential athleticism data. He pretty much hits every single threshold that you need to hit in terms of explosiveness, speed, and flexibility to become a multiple all-pro type of pass rusher, with the only question mark being his production data. So he's a fairly, he's a bit of a risk, he's kind of a risky prospect, but I do think that there's enough positives because, again, really high TFL market share, really high solo tackle market share, and even though his sack market share isn't amazing, I still think that solo tackle data and TFL data are really good indicators of a lot of different things. So even though his sack data isn't exactly where it needs to be, I still think that he can be, a really productive player, and has been, a fairly productive player up to this point, depending on who you talk to, data-wise. So I think, he's a very interesting player to see what his ultimate outcome is going to be, in terms of his future success at this point. But I do think that he's a very good player. He definitely has the athleticism going for him, and he also has, had some good production. So I think that he's going to continue to be a fairly good contributor for the Seattle Seahawks in the future, and probably end up being a long-term starter for them as well into the future too. And then we get to the next guy up. We have Jarran Reed, defensive tackle out of Alabama. When it comes to his production, he had a 36.77 solo tackle market share score, 9.78 sack market share score, and 19.66 tackle for loss market share score. Pretty much didn't hit any of the thresholds he needed to hit in terms of all-pro potential or Pro Bowl potential when it comes to his solo tackle data, his sack data, and his TFL data. And this includes nose tackles. I'm really getting tired of people saying that nose tackles don't have to be productive, that nose tackles don't have to have good market share, that nose tackles don't have to do anything but just take up space. These thresholds are based on all-pro nose tackles, are based on are based on Pro Bowl nose tackles. They're, I just don't like that argument that nose tackles don't have to be productive, when it's clear based on the data that, they do have to be productive, especially when it comes to solo tackle data, because as you can clearly see, solo tackle seems to be a bigger indicator of defensive tackle than sack and TFL, and he didn't perform well in solo tackle data. So all these sort of indicators don't really look the best for Jarran Reed. And then when you get to his athleticism, he had a 77.56 explosive lower body strength score, a 35.94 speed score, and a .13 flexibility score. His explosive lower body strength is decent, hits at least the All-Pro threshold for defensive tackles. His speed score, though, neither hits the All-Pro threshold or the Pro Bowl threshold, but his flexibility score does hit at least the Pro Bowl threshold, and he's only about a point away or so from the All-Pro threshold. So when it comes to his athleticism, I'd say he's more so inconsistent. He does have really good explosiveness in terms of explosive lower body strength, but he's not fast, and his flexibility is not elite, to say the least. So, which flexibility does a lot with leverage. Basically the ability to, if you're more flexible, you're able to generate better leverage. So, that's the only sort of issue with Jarran Reed based on his production. I would say based on his production data and based on his athleticism data, you're looking at a guy who is a potential starting defensive tackle, but not someone that I think is going to ever hit high-quality outcomes at the NFL level. So not a guy that I think is going to end up being an All-Pro guy or a Pro Bowl guy, but definitely could become a long-term starter. He's, of course, a starter right now, and that's basically how I kind of ruled down on Jarran Reed is I think you're basically going to get a long-term starter with this guy, but this isn't a guy that you would consider to become a Hall of Famer. That's not exactly Jarran Reed's game, but he does have enough positive athleticism things to point towards success. And then the last player we get to is Malik McDowell. Of course, the draft pick of the Seattle Seahawks this year. Based on his production data, he had a 93.76 solo tackle mark share score, 81.29 sack mark share score, and 88.40 tackle for loss mark share score. Based on his production data, he pretty much hits every single threshold that you're looking for when it comes to multiple All-Pro, multiple Pro Bowl defensive tackles based on his overall production data. When it comes to his athleticism data, this is where things kind of get a little more inconsistent with him. Only had a 32.48 explosive body strength score, and 82.74 speed score, and 55.93 flexibility score. His speed and flexibility is fine. He hits at least the minimum threshold for All-Pro potential based on his speed and flexibility, but his explosive lower body strength is where he runs into issues. But this is where the similarities kind of show up. When I looked at Malik McDowell and I was looking for a comparison based on data, the one guy that kept showing up was Richard Seymour. Seymour has similar height, similar weight. When you look at their overall production data, very similar in terms of production, but Malik McDowell actually had better sacks. Also in terms of athleticism data, Malik McDowell had pretty much similar speed. I don't really have the flexibility data on Richard Seymour, and Seymour was a little bit more explosive than McDowell. But this is kind of the sort of comparison. This is the potential for Malik McDowell. If everything turns on for him, if he's able to, improve himself a bit, I think that this is a relatively interesting ceiling. I think that this is ultimately as close to a ceiling as you're going to find for a guy like Malik McDowell. So I would say that this is kind of the best sort of potential that you should expect. Will he hit this? Maybe not. I mean, again, he pretty much just hit starter. Based on the data, he looks more like a starting defensive tackle than a multiple Pro Bowl, multiple All-Pro guy. I'm just leaving it out there that, the one guy who didn't quite hit the explosive lower body strength score, the one outlier guy, Richard Seymour, in terms of his explosive lower body strength, because he's the only guy, every single defensive tackle except for Richard Seymour had at least these particular athleticism scores. So I think that this is sort of a good example of what Malik McDowell's ultimate upside could be. So ultimately, how do I feel about these guys? Well, I think all these guys have positives. I think Frank Clark has a lot of athleticism to him, of course, and I think that he's going to continue to be successful in the way that he's been used. Being that guy that you bring in and he he takes on a certain matchup and he takes advantage of that matchup because he's so athletic that he's just a mismatch against certain guys. When he faces an offensive tackle that isn't very explosive, he has that advantage. And then, of course, when you look at Jarran Reed, not the best production profile. Again, not a guy I would really ever consider becoming an All-Pro or Pro Bowl defensive tackle, but definitely a guy that could become a long-term starter based on his overall profile. And again, so far, he is a long-term starter. Like, he's listed on the depth chart. Last time I checked, according to Ireland's, he's the starting tackle right next to Sheldon Richardson. So I think that might be the sort of best sort of role for him in the future, kind of a complimentary guy, but not a guy, again, that I would ever really consider to be an All-Pro or Pro Bowl potential defensive tackle. So that's basically where I kind of roll on Jarran Reed. And then with Malik McDowell, he's still up in the air a bit, but I do think that the potential, at least, is a Richard Seymour. I think that if you just look at their profiles in terms of production and height and weight and athleticism data to a certain extent, I think that the best ultimate ceiling upside sort of potential for McDowell is a Richard Seymour. Will he hit that potential? I can't really say that, but I do think that there's enough on paper to at least say that Malik McDowell could become a long-term starter. I think there's enough positives in his profile to point towards becoming a starter, but just not enough to really feel 100% comfortable that he's going to become a multiple All-Pro, multiple Pro Bowl type, which makes sense as to why he fell as far as he did. He wasn't a first-round pick. He wasn't a top 10 pick anyways. So when he was projected to be one for most of the draft season up until the draft. So that basically goes over all those defensive tackles. Of course, my name is James Coburn. You can find my other work at draftcoburn.wordpress.com. You can also follow me on Twitter at Geometrics. And if you like this content and you want more content like this, be sure to leave a like and subscribe. Share this video as well with anybody that you know, and I'll talk to you guys in the next video. Peace.